year grad student in the sociocultural department in college at UNM. I've recently taken a more academic interest in some very personal passions of mine because what I focus on is mainly narrative, history making, and the way we relate to history and how that impacts the way we relate to our issues in the current day. And this has led to the opportunity to do field work in a fictional country, and I'll get into what I mean by that. But this is Apprenticeship, Ritual Space, and Subjunctive Imaginations in the Kingdom of Atenveldt. So here's a little bit about my methodology and personal involvement. For the past 4 years, I've been doing something called historical European martial arts. We reconstruct historical sword fighting techniques, mainly based on primary sources. I learned long sword out of a textbook from 1410. 3 years of that, I've been part of the Society for Creative Anachronism, which is the organization we're going to be talking about today. And how exactly to describe it is complicated, but we'll get into it. I also did 1 week of participant observation at a regional event in Phoenix, Arizona called War of the Phoenix. It's the biggest of these war events in the Southwest. It happens once per year. I've been the past 3 years. This is the first year I was really doing it with field work in mind. I got to do 7.5 hours of recorded, semi-structured interviews with people that I met through the SCA or through HEMA initially. A lot of these are personal friends. I feel the need to disclose that because in anthropology we talk a lot about to what extent we can be objective, either in studying our own culture or other people's. My participants, not all of them, but a lot of them are people who are very important. So I feel the need to disclose that. This work was done in Arizona, or the Kingdom of Atenveldt, as we will be calling it. There is very little academic research on the SCA in the mundane world, which is what the SCA calls the world outside of these spaces and the world outside of this organization. So this is thus far mostly based on personal original research. Since there's not a lot of academic research, the SCA has a lot of its own primary documents that I will be looking at for my paper. Here's a short list of some of the people that I interviewed. I'll get into why they have all these funny names, except for one person who hasn't picked their name yet. But these are all people that I met through SCA and have different relationships with, but the information was gathered through either these recorded interviews or unrecorded informal conversations, contributions from other people, personal observations, or just general knowledge from my experience. So I'm not going to go through all this, but while I was at the event, I was making note of how these larger events in forming a subjunctive ritual space use the 7 characteristics of ritual. And I found quite a few examples for each of them, and it's a lot of overlap. A lot of sensory experience, attentive state of mind, very marked activity with a lot of rules, a lot of indexicality. These are regularly scheduled events, and they index history in a very conscious way. I'm not going to go over all of this. You all know about subjunctive ritual. I'm using Seligman's perspective because what I really ended up focusing on is how these events provide a space where people take on new roles, practice new perspectives, new ways of treating one another, new ways of living in the world, new ways of practicing empathy that can affect the way that you interact with the mundane world. One quote that I found really interesting from one of my participants was, an overarching value of the SCA is to create spaces for people. I think the value is separateness from culture, making a culture outside of culture. That step back into it, that step outside yourself, that step outside the way you want to live. So, a little bit of history about the SCA. One participant telling me sort of her oral history of the SCA called it a party protest against modernity. Lord Claus Einhorn referred to that initial event as a dinner party that got out of hand. This is a picture from the Eberhauer Landsknecht camp. I think either right before or right after their court ceremony that they have at the end of these events. So it was created in the late 60s, the mid to late 60s, when there's a lot of this hippie romanticism about different historical periods. People are looking around at modernity and they're unsatisfied. They don't like what modernity has brought. They don't necessarily want to go back to the days of intense patriarchy or slavery or things like that, but they're looking for some other way to live. You get the first Renaissance festivals in 1963. The living history movement really starts, up in Northern California around this time, and the SCA was a big part of that. The SCA since then has been hugely important in getting the ball rolling on reconstructing historical martial arts practices that have really taken on a life of their own outside the SCA. Historical European martial arts, what I usually do, is very different from fighting in the SCA. It's less team-based, things like that, and more academic. But this is really where a lot of these practices started. People also practice and reconstruct historical skills, whether that's garment making, or beer brewing, or archery, or baking, or historical cooking. Some people have been reconstructing cookbooks of old historical recipes and things like that, almost as a form of experimental archaeology. Nowadays, it was started with a lot of these very conscious goals, but nowadays refers to itself in educational terms as a public history association. And I want to look at if subjunctive is a grammatical move where we're describing hypotheticals. If I were to do this, what would happen? I think the hypothetical imagination of the SCA is if we were to be more chivalrous to one another, what would that look like? So this is a map of the known worlds, according to the SCA. You can see everything is broken up into these kingdoms. The kingdom of Atenveldt, where I am a subject and did my field work, is very neatly within the bounds of Arizona. You can see they're broken down into these smaller fiefdoms called baronies. Those are run by elected barons and baronesses in an administrative capacity. The monarchs are chosen through term combat.
Can I just break in one second? Are these places where people themselves practice this? Like, it looks like it's Pakistan or something, doesn't it? What is that?
Iraq, yeah. Apparently there are people in Iraq doing SCA stuff. I would assume with Japan and Iraq, my immediate assumption would be U.S. military bases.
Okay.
That was one thing that stuck out to me. I don't have any evidence to back that up of how the Kingdom of Dragonbolt works or anything like that. I'm really only familiar with Atenveldt and now a little bit the Kingdom of the Outlands, which is where we are right now.
I can confirm at least in Japan it's mostly base.
Yeah, probably. So war. These are these huge events, these big camping events. War of the Phoenix is a week long. You're camping out in the desert. You're dressed in these funny clothes. There are parties every night. There are tournaments. There are these big pitched battles. People are showing off and competing with various skills that they've learned and are mastering, and things like that. And I'm going to show just a quick, very, very quick video of where.
Oh, you have to hit it again. I think I must have posted down. It's in your there, in YouTube.
Okay. So this is a very quick video of what the fighting looks like. I'm actually in this video. Both because it sounds awesome and because it would be really good research. So I've been throwing around a lot of weird names and weird titles, and I think this is one of the most important parts of how to interact with the subjunctive space. The subjunctive ritual space is one in which you are acting out certain roles in order to gain perspectives, that you do not retain those roles once you leave the ritual space. So some people take their names and personas very seriously in reconstructing a historical identity, maybe wearing very historically accurate clothes. Some people take it a little less seriously. I wear a pirate boat. And your names can either be given to you as some sort of nickname, or it expresses some sort of values about yourself, or the aesthetics of what culture you want to represent historically. And it can also express membership of households, which are these voluntary associations that operate outside of the baronial structure. You're a member of the barony based on where you live. You're a member of a household based on who you fight with and who you join. You don't have to be a member of a household, but it is a very fun part. Lord, Lady, or Armiger, those signify if you've gotten an award of arms, which is sort of the first award that you get for recognition of you're part of the community, you've been helping out, people have noticed you, maybe people think you're a pretty good fighter, something like that. Sir or Dame are symbols of knighthood. I think it's interesting that in the Kingdom of the West, every woman who's been knighted has chosen Sir as their title, as a symbolic way of showing we are just like any other fighter, we are just like any other knight, we can still kick your ass. And they can. Barons and baronesses are your excellency, monarchs are your majesty, laurels are, we'll get into an apprenticeship structure sort of based on the guild structures of people mastering a certain craft. So apprentice, journeyman, master. So master and mistress are the titles there. This is a picture of my award of arms, given the 8th day of March, Anno Societas 59, called 2025. So as a living history organization, it keeps its own history in this fictional world very seriously, hence why it has, its own dating system. It was given to me by His Majesty King Morgan and Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth. I think new monarchs were elevated maybe last week, but I don't know who they are. This is the group I'm part of, the Atenveldt Mining Company. This is how I got into it through historical European martial arts. It was started by Lord Klaus and Lady Freya. Lord Klaus has a lot of experience in HEMA. They both have a lot of experience in the SCA. Klaus is a really good fighter, and Freya is a senior instructional designer at ASU. So she's the perfect person for creating a goal-oriented lesson plan that would get us ready to train for our first war together. It really started as a way to onboard people into the FCA using these household structures in a way that you already have a home. You already have people you're camping with, people you're fighting with, people you're training with. You have an identity, a guideline of what shape your persona around. Most of my friends are 16th century German mercenaries. But I decided to be a pirate. And sort of in an experimental way, we try to incorporate more academically based fighting styles into the SCA with mixed results. So apprenticeships and peerages. I initially was very focused on rites of passage before I sort of focused on the more subjunctive space, but I think this is so important for the roles that people act out and how your role within the society changes with further recognition as a member of the group. So there are different orders people can be inducted into. The Order of the Chivalry, those are knights. Squires are chosen by a knight to train with them for a few years before they are eventually knighted. It can take a very long time, it can take only a few years, it depends. Squires wear a red belt. Once you're a knight, you're allowed to wear a white belt. Pelicans are the ones recognized for really administrative service in helping the organization run, or just being a really recognized outstanding member of the community. And the Order of the Laurel have mastered something in the arts and sciences in the SCA. I think that's the rarest one. One of my participants said that he had only ever seen one person receive the laurel. And these form a lot of very close friendships and bonds between teacher and student that can have the same stresses in it as any other relationship. Maybe Freya, about her teacher, said, Greta's my best friend. I love her. I love her so much. She's like a mom to me. I call her my belt mom. So, obviously not like a true parent-child relationship, because obviously we talk about things that I won't ever tell my mom. I talk to her about life things, and she talks to me about her life things, and it's interesting to kind of navigate sometimes, because she's my peer, she's my teacher, she's also my friend. Knighting ceremonies, I'm going to go through this really quickly. The vigil is a liminal stage event in Victor Turner's terms before the elevated individual is re-aggregated into the society with a new role. So people will be in a tent or a room, often overnight, receiving visitors, giving and receiving advice or praise, things like that. They swear an oath, and they are symbolically struck by the monarch It's for knights specifically. It's the last blow that will go in answer. You're a knight now. You have to stand up for yourself. You have to uphold the values of the kingdom and fight for them, stand up for others. I attended a vigil the night before Sir Loden was elevated. I only got 10 minutes in a tent with him at maybe 1 in the morning. And I asked him what he thought people should know about the FCA. He said Atenveldt wants people who love history to share with others. We want people who are unapologetically themselves. Fringe players who just want to party, dress up, and drink are welcome, but we also need loyals who do hours and hours of research. The values of every kingdom are different. Atenveldt was the Wild West, now it's more thought. Prioritize excellence in all we do. This is a picture of the knight, or a few pictures of the knight in Sir Helgi Loosebane. You can see he's wearing a white belt and a chain. Those are two symbols you're allowed to wear as a knight. This is my good friend getting punched in the chest. It's the last blow that will grow up by answers, and somebody's holding him back from stepping back because the guy punched him pretty hard. But not everybody wants to act out a specific dedicated role through these apprenticeship structures. Some people want to try different things, and there are very varied levels of commitment. So a lot of times, whether or not you're really practicing these subjunctive values really depends on to what extent and in what ways you're participating in society. Liam Catherine said, I've just enjoyed the charcuterie board of opportunities, so I've not persisted in a single interest. I just wanted to taste them all. I have to do some cooking. I wanted to do some sewing. I still want to do some singing. Dancing most recently, and archery. I've just been tasting all of it, so that's been my life for the past year or 2 years. I've been a little pressured to move forward with the squireship, pursue an art form or something, but I'm having too much fun trying everything else. Lady Freya said, I like it because it's never-ending stream of hobbies and shit to do. Like, yeah, I started for sewing, but now I'm doing embroidery and weaving, and I still do singing, and I'm learning stamping, carving, sort of cooking and bread making. I love to learn how to brew beer. I started learning archery. I made my own arrows. I ended up learning all these really cool, awesome random skills that are just fun to do and talk about. So yeah, it's a hobby, but it's also my community. It's where I found my husband. In many ways, it's the reason I'm at where I'm at in my life today. These are some of Lady Freya's creations. That's Lord Klaus showing off her progressively more intricate and more impressive garment making as she's been studying with Mr. Spreda. This is her and our friend Lady Alice demonstrating at an arts and sciences event. So this is just sort of a visual of the non-combat related skills that people are reconstructing in this space. Gender dynamics came up a lot with people I talked to. There are people of all genders in the FCA. They fight together in pretty much the same events. Titles are gendered. They're usually non-gendered variations. There are no restrictions on what titles you choose. Like I said, knights in the Kingdom of the West use Sir regardless of gender. There have been explicitly gender dynamics and restrictions criticized, usually rooted in an effort to index historical systems, but as we critique and modify the way that we understand those values of chivalry in a more modern context, those things have been very deliberately reformed. One fighter said, you can't help but be perceived. You don't blend into the background. You're not just a fighter anymore. There's like an extra layer that's automatically added to their perception. And I talked to a lot of women who really love fighting in the SCA, but did have mixed experiences on how they're received by them and they fight. But a lot of women express a strong sense of sisterhood with other women in the SCA, especially one participant said that she always had trouble making friendships with other women, especially in a corporate job environment. This is really a space in which there's a looseness where people can connect in a more a deeper way than they usually would be able to outside of these events in the mundane world. The Oleander is an award given to fighting women. The Juniper is an award given to trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming fighters. And deliberately practicing inclusivity and the importance of visibility came up a lot in these interviews, especially as a sort of bridge group, which Klaus was citing some sociological theory, but I didn't have time to look too much into it yet, so for our purposes, bridging is a Einhorn original. But Sir Jane said, and she's the second trans person to be knighted in society, she said, interacting with me and seeing me amongst their peer group normalizes trans people. They can see that, hey, look, I'm being told that trans people are these crazy groomers, but there's this trans person that I deal with on council in my game with the SCA all the time. They don't seem to be any of these things. It stops making it weird. It stops. Klaus on the Concept of Bridge and Social Group says, despite all the marketing against transness done by conservative think tanks, when you get down to it, Sam and me are a little squirrely, but they like their beer just like everybody else, or their cider, or their wine, or their non-alcoholic fizzy drink, right? They're just like everybody else. And that's why those bridge groups are really critical. And I think that's why the SCA is still out here doing good work. Not only is it like educating people about history, but it's educating people about their neighbors. So it's providing a space in which people are very deliberately interacting with groups they wouldn't interact with normally, that have been brought together under circumstances they usually wouldn't be brought together. I thought a little bit of James Scott in talking about how some people express the values of the SCA, especially when they express them in almost political terms. But I don't see this in James Scott's terms of ritual resistance or hidden and public transcripts. I think the subjunctive explanation works a lot better, and I'll get into why. One person called the SCA a solidarity network bigger than Kropotkin could have imagined. I don't know if anybody knows who Kropotkin was. He's a 19th century anarchist philosopher, sort of the founder of anarchist communism as a philosophy. Same person said, we are bigger than the IWW, or the industrial workers of the world, an anarchist-leaning trade union that's been around for maybe 125 years or so. People express a lot of anti-authoritarian values in the SCA across multiple interviews. We talk a lot about chivalry and honor and things like that. But usually when you think of honor culture, it's a very masculine thing in which there are socially legitimized forms of antisocial violence. So we're not practicing chivalry in that sort of way. We are indexing these ideas of chivalry in order to express the values we want to express. We have these nobility structures and wars and fighting, but it's all controlled violence. These are all voluntary associations that have no coercive force to back them up. They end up being a parody of state institutions. They end up being a parody of the violence of the state. If we can be chivalrous to each other in a setting of controlled violence, the idea is there's nowhere we can't be chivalrous. People emphasize a culture of community care, mutual aid, and sharing of resources and skills, as I sort of got into with the arts and sciences and how connected people are through these apprenticeship structures or just trying out different things. One sort of unofficial tagline that some people have pushed back on, but I think it's interesting because so many people have said it, is the Middle Ages as they should have been. So there isn't slavery, there isn't the total subjugation of women, queerness is totally open and often explicitly celebrated at these court ceremonies and things like that. It's a public history association, but the history we are trying to bring to life is, to some extent, consciously advanced. Why I think this is very specific to the subjunctive rather than ritual resistance, because the SCA is not a consciously political organization. They didn't set out to organize towards massive social change. The goal that I really found in these interviews, and with a lot of the people I talk to, is that the goal is subjective inner transformation that changes the way you interact with the mundane world once you leave these events. I asked everyone I talked to, or most of the people I talked to, for a no shit there I was story. So the Atenveldt mining company, before these events, everybody wants to collect some sort of story of something funny that happened to you or something badass and impressive you did. Something that when your friends ask you how the event goes, you go, no shit, there I was in the spear line, all of a sudden they come charging, blah, 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 blah. The story of how Sir Helgi Moosebane got his name Moosebane, I almost included. It's too good to abridge it, and I wouldn't have time. But this is one that really stood out to me. This is Klaus's first war. He said, all the parties and fighting happened at this rodeo pit. It goes down a steep, steep, steep hill. And I went there to party, me and my buddy Chad. We're trash. We should not be trash, but we are. We get to the back of our tents, which are up on this hill. We're halfway up the hill. Chad turns to me and goes, dude, I can't make it, dude. And because I was young and dumb, I looked him in the eyes, put my hand on his shoulder, and said, okay. And I laughed at him. Deeply uncool, but I did it. So I go to bed, wake up the next morning, Chad's not in his tent. I'm like, oh fuck. So I start retracing my steps with baby's first hangover. And I find him on that hill, pass on down that hill, and I find him on that hill with a blanket put over him, a filled water bottle, and a little ramekin filled with 2 Atenveldt next to it. So the SCA, in my opinion, has always been a very, very safe place. I also asked people how they think the SCA affects the way that they interact with the mundane world. I got a lot of really good quotes from this that I, had to stick with too. Sir Helgi Woosbane said, everybody's a little more connected than you think, and it's not a huge thing to just jump in and help, or just kind of pick up a little extra slack here and there. The SCA is a very cooperative environment, where like if anybody's putting in a tent, everybody's putting in a tent. I think community is where you made it, and getting to be part of the community in an SCA, I get you in the rhythm and habit of becoming a part of the community elsewhere. Sir Jane said, honestly, I believe that it does bleed into the mundane world in a very, very touching way to each person. When you go out and portray your persona, you're trying to be the person you want to be. You're trying to be your best self. And when you go, you portray your best self, and then you go back to your mundane life, it's hard not to bring something into your mundane life. Look at the trials and tribulations of your daily life through that lens that you develop from trying to be your best self. So we're very consciously practicing these roles. My name is Sam Gaines. In the SCA, it is Lady Junia the Zealot. I am trying to be someone. Everyone is trying to be someone, whether that is identical with who they usually are, or whether they're trying to be someone else. But you are very conscious of the role you're taking up. You're very conscious of the way you're interacting with the society. And finally, I asked participants, if you had a friend who was going to their first SCA event, what do you think you would want to tell them? And Ward Clifford, I think, had a quote that I found particularly interesting. So this is a fun and interesting culture. If you go to another country, there's going to be culture shock with regard to how they treat you and the things they do. Just try to roll with it. Try not to judge too harshly. There's things that are definitely wrong with it. These things are there for a reason. Sometimes they're good reasons, and sometimes they're not. They're there for a reason. Dinners are fun. Parties are off the hook. People are so cool to you when you come to their camp in the middle of the night. Bring a gift, bring something to drink. Bring a talent. Don't be bashful about your talent. If you can sing, sing. If you can juggle, juggle. If you're a tap dancer, bring a 4x4 sheet of plywood in your tap shoes. There's someone who will appreciate your talent, and probably that someone will be a group of 30 people that are going to give you a standing ovation. These are some of my sources, and these are my much more important sources. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we don't have a lot of time, but we've got a little time for questions. I'm going to start with one. War is the central theme here. Why?
I think people like hitting each other with sticks. It started as a dinner party, it got out of hand, that, was a tournament. It wasn't just a dinner party, it was also a tournament. I think a lot of it is the draw of there's romanticism of, like we think of how we index chivalry and then how chivalry is portrayed in pop culture. A lot of it has to do with martial culture. A lot of it has to do with, glory and honor in combat and things like that, but we're doing it in a way that's very much a parody. I think it's also because the arts and sciences are a hugely important part of the SCA, as are the parties and the court ceremonies and things like that, but a lot of people are there to fight. That's, what I thought my focus was going to be when I got into it, was I just thought I was a fighter. And I didn't fight when I went this past year. I fought the previous 2 years, but that really gave me an opportunity to explore some of the other parts of the SCA. But I think a lot of it is people grew up watching Princess Bride and Monty Python and, A Knight's Tale or Kingdom of Heaven and stuff like that. And I think a lot of it is the cool parts of the aesthetics that people are romanticizing in this way that indexes history. So that's why I think
I'm just curious what introduced you to this today.
So I was doing historical European martial arts, and Lord Klaus started an armored combat class with the goal of getting people ready to join the SCA. So he really brought me into it. He and Lady Freya, who helped him design the course, and really did a lot of administrative work. But yeah, I got into it through historical martial arts more generally, which is a more serious, explicitly fighting-oriented, without all the frills and costumes necessarily. It's fencing, but it hurts a little more. But yeah, that's how I got into it.
Is it strictly concerned with European history?
No. So it started with this European Romanticism, and obviously most of the aesthetics do range from high Middle Ages Europe to the Renaissance or the early modern period, but you can go as far back as you want. One thing I heard was they opened it up to as long as early modern Europeans knew that a culture existed, you could be someone from that culture. So Lord Klaus told me about, like, he met somebody who had like a Mesoamerican persona, because that sort of fits within the overlap of time periods. I've met people who have Japanese personas and fight with Japanese weapons. Mine is a Maltese pirate. My friends are all German. I've met some Mongolians and Scythians. But yeah, it's all sorts of people. You have a question?
Yes. So through this sort of, very conscious effort of maintaining a sense of, I guess, order within the ontological order of the outside, the mundane, and the inside, the SCA, is it kind of considered like a faux pas or kind of frowned upon to break that, to break through that role and break into the mundane while you're in that quote unquote subjunctive
Not
space?
necessarily. I was originally thinking about how the SCA uses ritual to establish a difference between the mundane world and the other worlds of war in an immersive way. And I was talking about this at war with Lord Clifford, and he said, well, it's not that immersive, is it? And I said, what do you mean? He points to a propane tank that's hooked up to a torch in the middle of camp. I will try to refer to people with their war names. I won't always. Sometimes people will call me Sam. One useful thing about the war names is for women at these events, if you don't want to be giving out your real name to a bunch of strangers, it is entirely normal and expected for you to give a fake name. And if anyone presses you on what your real name is, that's weird and people will tell them. So it also provides separation and anonymity. But people talk about their day-to-day in real life. They were asking me how things were in Albuquerque and stuff like that. Like, we're not just at war, we're still people.
Would you ever hang out with them in the mundane world?
Oh, I do.
It does.
Yeah, so
Like,
a lot of
did
things
you
are.
make a business deal with somebody at one of these events?
Yeah, I mean, people do buy and sell things.
Well, I don't so much that, like buying and selling a sword, but like, could you say, I need something for my restaurants that you are selling in your mundane life? Like,
That would probably be fine. I think some people would be like, do we really have to talk about work right now? But like, people still, like, I've maintained like connections in the SCA outside of the SCA. Like, people I've met through the SCA, that like, some of these participants are some of my closest friends from Phoenix.
Okay, so that's interesting. So it's not totally subjunctive.
Right, it's not totally subjunctive because you do form real relationships out in the world. Like Lady Freya, when she's talking to the friendship that she's really developed with Mistress Greta, who she didn't know very well before she was offered a belt as her new apprentice. And now they're very, very close. Lord Clifford, the knight that he's studying under, is teaching him blacksmithing, and also, helps him practice his sword and shield work outside of SCA stuff, as a knight would be expected to do. They're also close friends.
The subjunctive worked really well, but this isn't totally subjunctive.
It's not entirely subjunctive because you do form lasting relationships. Those relationships, somebody came up to me and said, consider the extent to which the SCA acts as a cover for leftist organizing, which is why I included their other quote at the top and why I was really thinking about that. And I was thinking, well, you do form relationships. It's not necessarily organizing. It could be networking. So you do meet people that you develop wider relationships with. And Lady Freya met her husband through the SCA. Lady Freya and Lord Klaus met through the SCA.
Okay, thank you.